Peace and blessings, dear FBA family and friends, and I see some enemies. I am your brother and host, Dr. Muhammad, and these are the Dr. Muhammad Files. So today will be a research-driven podcast that uncovers the anti-FBA racism and anti-black misandry that FBA males face at predominantly white institutions of higher learning. So let's get started.
Brothers and sisters and friends, and I see some enemies. In fact, I think we'd be fooling ourselves if we had an audience this large and didn't realize that there were some enemies present. In fact, I'm a black nationalist freedom fighter. The political philosophy of black nationalism only means that the black man should control the politics and the politicians in his own community. The time when white people can come in our community and get us to vote for them so that they can be our political leaders and tell us what to do and what not to do is long gone. By the same token, the time when that same white man, knowing that your eyes are too far open, can send another Negro into the community, get you and me to support him so he can use him to lead us astray, those days are long gone.
All right, let's get started. As y'all can see, I'm rocking my foundational Black American cowboy hat. Just got back from Texas, so I'm feeling the cowboy in me. So, even before the building of the USA by Black American freedmen, from the brutal atrocities initiated in 1492 by Italian explorer Christopher Columbus against red natives, black aboriginals, and later the kidnapped Africans who mixed with the former, contributing to the ethnogenesis of the FBA population as early as 1526 to the lasting legacies of systemic oppression, including chattel slavery, the peonage system, convict leasing, black codes, Jim Crow laws, police brutality, and the list goes on, all the way up until the modern crisis of mass incarceration. Each of these historical injustices has left a profound and lasting impact, fueling the persistent anti foundational Black American racism and anti Black misandry embedded within the United States educational system today. So, in my dissertation, Experiences of Foundational Black American Male Faculty Exploring Anti Black Racism at Predominantly White Institutions of Higher Learning, in the literature review section, Antecedents to Anti Black Racism in Higher Education, we examine the precursory of anti foundational Black American racism. And I define anti Black racism in the academic sphere as the negative stereotypes and perceptions of Black faculty that serve as precursors to discriminatory experiences within higher education, shaping the academic and social environments for both FBA faculty and students on college campuses. The research that I explored indicated that Black Americans, particularly FBA individuals with more pronounced racial phenotypical traits, are disproportionately associated with racial stereotypes. According to Parsons' 2018 research, the persistence of anti Black racism in higher education institutes, largely fueled by these stereotypes that I just mentioned, has deeply harmful effects on the experiences and perceptions of Black students, faculty, and staff. Furthermore, Parsons 2018 highlighted how this racism is reflected in the marginalization and positioning of Black faculty within the academia, reinforcing systemic barriers to their professional advancement and inclusion. So, drawing on our dear brother and scholar, Dr. T. Hassan Johnson, I also found in my study anti-black misandry exists. Curry 2018 defines anti-black misandry as the widespread belief in the inferiority of black men. This is important, FBA family and friends, rooted in flawed assumptions about their supposed deficiencies, tendencies toward deviance, or exaggerated personality traits, such as hypersexuality or hypermasculinity. You always hear the left talk about hypermasculinity, right? This rationalizes the criminalization, phobics, and sanctioning of black male life. Essentially, foundational black American family and friends, according to Dr. Johnson, in 2022, his research, black men face anti-black misandry, a form of racialized sexism that is often mistaken for racism due to the influence of academia and mainstream media. So, FBA male faculty face targeted exclusion, discrimination, and systemic barriers that hinder their professional advancement. Despite the implementation of initiatives such as diversity, equity, inclusion programs and affirmative action, which were intended to reduce racism in higher education, specifically for foundational black Americans. Anti-black, at least affirmative action was specifically for foundational black Americans. Anti-black racism remains deeply entrenched, particularly at PWIs. I argue that rather than benefiting FBA male faculty, these programs have largely sidelined FBA, perpetuating discrimination and creating additional obstacles to FBA male faculty's success. Negative stereotypes and perceptions of black male faculty not only contribute to the lack of diversity in higher education, but also perpetuate educational violence, a systemic form of discrimination that creates roadblocks and normalizes harm against black individuals. So this is not just in the educational field, but it normalizes harm against black people, black males, FBA in general. This directly challenges the effectiveness of diversity, equity, inclusion, and affirmative action programs, as they clearly fail to support foundational black American faculty. Mustafa, 2017, not to be confused with Omwa, in his research, he defines educational violence as a historical entrenched tool used to suppress and control black individuals, evolving over time to placate demands for racial justice while maintaining institutional oppression in a qualitative historical literature review. Mustafa also illustrates how black individuals, both within and beyond formal education systems, face restricted opportunities and, in extreme cases, loss of life due to the persistence of white supremacy. The study also underscores the historical continuity of anti-black racism, or anti-blackness, I should say, in academia, highlighting how negative perceptions and stereotypes fuel the systematic exclusion and marginalization of black faculty and students. So rather than addressing these deeply rooted issues, higher education institutes uphold structural barriers that disadvantage specifically foundational black American faculty while using DEI rhetoric as a superficial shield against accountability. So, anti-foundational black American racism and anti-foundational black American misandry extends to the tenure process. Abdul Rahim 2016 conducted a qualitative study examining the lived experiences of black faculty navigating the tenure process at PWIs and found that institutionalized anti-black racism and a lack of cultural diversity have led to the severe underrepresentation of black faculty in tenure positions. This directly challenges the effectiveness of DEI and affirmative action programs, as they are clearly not being utilized to support FBA faculty. One striking example from the study revealed that a particular PWI, out of 43 tenure applicants, 10 were black, and all 10, listen to this, FBA family and friends, were denied, while 100% of white applicants successfully secured tenure. The study further highlighted that the lack of tenured black faculty limits opportunities for advocacy and institutional change, as tenured faculty often hold the power to push for cultural equity and inclusion, or so-called equity and inclusion. Legal challenges regarding tenure and promotion denials further expose systemic anti-FBA discrimination in historical white institutions. Ward and Hall conducted a Ward and Hall, that is 2022, conducted a qualitative counterstory study analyzing lawsuits involving black faculty facing tenure and promotion denials, uncovering significant patterns of bias, prejudice, and discriminatory practices. Beyond tenure, studies have also documented the hostile environments black professors endure within academic departments. For example, Zabrani ETL 2017 detailed accounts of overt and covert hostility, such as bullying behaviors and systematic sabotage, where colleagues deliberately create barriers that black faculty face, but other melanated groups do not. These findings, FBA family and friends, expose the deep-seated structural racism in academia and highlight how DEI and affirmative action initiatives, rather than addressing the problem, often fail to serve the very group most impacted, foundational black American faculty, particularly black men. So, FBA male scholarship on anti-black racism is frequently dismissed or devalued during the tenure and review process, reinforcing systemic barriers that hinder their academic advancement. This further underscores the ineffectiveness of DEI initiatives and affirmative action programs for FBA faculty. One of my study participants, one of my participants in my study, Malcolm, a pseudonym, he highlighted how research centered on FBA experiences and history is received differently at PWIs. He posed a rhetorical question: if my research is only seen as relevant to my small community, then why is it that research on white people is assumed to be universally applicable, even for black students? This is telling. Malcolm also discussed the ways anti-black racism directly influences the tenure process, explaining, black faculty are subjected to harsher scrutiny, unwarranted critiques of their research productivity, teaching, and service, leading to disparities in tenure outcomes, despite their exceptional performance. He further noted the tenure process has always been difficult for most black people. Similarly, another participant in my study, we called him Du Bois, a pseudonym, described how institutional metrics and voting processes dominated by, you guessed it, white senior faculty with little understanding of critically engaged black scholarship create systemic barriers for black scholars. He stated, these biases make it difficult for black faculty to receive fair evaluations, as their diverse contributions are often overlooked or undervalued. These firsthand experiences, family, expose the structural inequities embedded within the tenure process and emphasize the urgent need for systemic change to ensure fairness, particularly for FBA faculty. DEI initiatives have failed to address these disparities, further proving their ineffectiveness in supporting FBA faculty advancement. So we talked about how DEI has not been effective for a foundational Black American male faculty. Well, who's benefited from DEI initiatives? DEI initiatives in higher education are often framed as mechanisms to foster inclusivity. Yet my research highlights how these programs systematically exclude and marginalize foundational Black American male faculty. So rather than addressing the systemic barriers that uniquely impact FBA men, DEI initiatives frequently prioritize non FBA faculty, including white Latinos, white Asians, Africans, and Caribbeans, under the broad umbrella of quote unquote diversity. This practice, FBA family and friends and enemies, this practice dilutes the specific struggles of FBA men by conflating their historical and institutional experiences with those of other groups who may not face the same generational disenfranchisement. So, in other words, they superimpose everyone else's, that is, non FBA experiences over FBA experiences. Participants in my study reported that while DEI programs claim to promote racial equity, they often function as performative measures that benefit individuals from immigrant backgrounds while leaving foundational Black American faculty to navigate structural anti-Black racism alone. It should be noted that foundational Black Americans are the only ones, I would assert, that fight global white supremacy. No one else does this. So this exclusionary pattern reinforces the systematic disadvantages FBA men face in faculty hiring, tenure, and promotion, further entrenching their underrepresentation in higher education. Malcolm, one of my participants, further highlighted how DEI initiatives in higher education often bypass FBA male faculty in favor of other ethnic groups. He pointed to an example at the university he was at where the president strategically, and I talked about this in one of my other broadcasts, he strategically appointed a DEI representative who would align with the institutional interests rather than challenge systemic inequities. Malcolm explained, the president hired a colleague of mine, a former Singaporean military official with a PhD, whose research had nothing to do with DEI issues. Despite his lack of expertise, he was placed in charge of equity efforts at the university. Under his leadership, the hiring practice continued to exclude FBA faculty, instead prioritizing white Latinos, white Asians, Africans, and Islanders. Many, listen to this, family and friends and enemies, many of whom did not support DEI initiatives. That's insane. Similarly, Martin, one of the participants, he described the shortcomings of recruitment efforts for FBA male faculty, stating that while his institution engages in general outreach to Black candidates, there are no intentional or target initiatives to recruit foundational Black American faculty specifically, unlike the specific targeting of other ethnic groups. This is what I have labeled the performative diversity initiatives. He noted, he being Martin, that the recruitment strategy lacks a focused agenda and remains limited to local hiring efforts with job postings on uh, broad platforms rather than dedicated outreach specifically aimed at bringing in FBA scholars. So in other words, they're posting things on platforms that are broad, not doing a targeted effort, which they probably know will not attract the FBA scholars. So FBA family and friends, these accounts reinforce the systemic exclusion of foundational Black American men from DEI hiring initiatives, further cementing disparities in faculty representations by prioritizing non-FBA faculty such as white Latinos, Africans, Caribbeans over FBA male faculty. So we mentioned performative diversity. Performative diversity initiatives in higher education often serve as symbolic gestures rather than substantive uh, efforts to address systemic inequities, particularly for FBA men. Institutions frequently highlight their commitment to diversity by showcasing faculty of color in promotional materials, panels, and leadership meetings. However, these displays tend to prioritize non FBA individuals such as white Latinos, white Asians, Africans, and Caribbeans, while sidelining FBA male faculty. This selective inclusion creates the illusion of progress while reinforcing the exclusion of those who challenge institutional anti black racism, foundational black Americans. So, participants in my study described how these showcases are designed to appease external pressures for diversity without addressing the structural barriers that disproportionately impact foundational black American faculty, such as tenure denial, lack of research support, and isolation within academic departments. By categorizing all non white faculty under the broad umbrella of diversity, institutions effectively erase the specific struggles of foundational black American faculty, perpetuating their marginalization within the academy. Institutions strategically, this is a very important point, FBA family and friends, institutions strategically use broad terms like people of color, faculty of color, and minorities as a loophole to appear diverse while intentionally bypassing FBA male faculty. By lumping all non white groups together under these umbrella terms, they create the illusion of inclusion while disproportionately hiring non FBA individuals such as white Latinos, Africans, and Caribbean. This allows them to claim diversity without addressing the systemic exclusion of FBA men who are often deliberately overlooked in higher decisions. Essentially, these institutions manipulate diversity language to sidestep their unwillingness to hire FBA male faculty while maintaining the appearance of equity and inclusion. So, in conclusion, FBA family and friends and enemies, the performative nature of diversity initiatives in higher education not only misrepresents genuine inclusivity, but also reinforces the marginalization of foundational black American male faculty during the tenure process and masks the deep rooted systemic anti foundational black American racism and anti foundational black American misandry that persists within academic institutions. So if you like this broadcast, not podcast, like it, share it, comment below. Signing off, your brother and host, Dr. Muhammad, and these are the Dr. Muhammad Files.